Welcome listeners! Are you ready for some fright? Well, strap yourself in for these two black-eyed kid creepypasta stories, not for the faint of heart. We got suspense, mystery, and death. So, make a coffee, hot chocolate, or cup of tea, and let's begin something creepy. The Black-Eyed Kids. My internet service provider used to have offices in a shopping centre before they moved to their comparatively lush accommodations elsewhere. There was a Dropbox at that original location. The monthly bill was due, and thus, there but for the grace of the net, I went. It was about 9:30 PM when I left. From my relatively isolated apartments, it's about 10 to 15 minutes or so to downtown. Abilene has a population of about 110,000. Right next to Camelot Communications' old location is a $1.50 movie theatre. At the time, the place was featuring that masterwork of modern film, Mortal Kombat. I drove by the theatre on the way into the centre proper and pulled into an empty parking space. Using the glow of the marquee to write out my check, I was startled to hear a knock on the driver's side window of my car. I looked over and saw two children staring at me from the street. I need to describe them, with the one feature, you can guess what it was, that I didn't realize until about halfway through the conversation, cleverly omitted. Both appeared to be in that semi-mystical stage of life that children get into where you can't exactly tell their age. Both were boys, and my initial impression is that they were somewhere between 10 to 14. Boy number 1 was the spokesman. Boy number 2 didn't speak during the entire conversation, at least not in words. Boy number 1 was slightly taller than his companion, wearing a pullover, hooded shirt with a sort of grey checked pattern and jeans. I couldn't see his shoes. His skin was olive-coloured and had curly medium-length brown hair. He exuded an air of quiet confidence. Boy number 2 had pale skin with a trace of freckles. His primary characteristic seemed to be looking around nervously. He was dressed in a similar manner to his companion, but his pullover was a light green colour. His hair was sort of pale orange. They don't appear to be related. At least, directly. Oh, great. They're gonna hit me up for money. And then the air changed. I've explained this before, but for the benefit of any new lurkers out there, right before I experience something strange, there's a change in perception that comes about, which I describe in the above manner. It's basically enough to know it's too late. So there I was, filling out a check in my car, which was still running, and in a sudden panic over the appearance of two little boys. I was confused, but an overwhelming sense of fear and unearthliness rushed in nonetheless. The spokesman smiled, and that sight, for some inexplicable reason, chilled my blood. I could feel fight or flight responses kicking in. Something I knew instinctually was not right, but I didn't know what it could possibly be. I rolled down the window very, very slightly and asked, "Yes?" The spokesman smiled again, broader this time. His teeth were very, very white. "Hey, mister, what's up? We have a problem," he said. His voice was that of a young man, but his diction, quite calm and something I still couldn't put my finger on, and made my desire to flee even greater. "You see, my friend and I want to see the films, but we forgot our money," he continued. "We need to get to our house to get it. Want to help us out?" Okay, journalists are required to talk to lots of people, and that includes children. I've seen and spoken to a lot of them. Here's how it usually goes. Mister? Can I see that camera? I won't break it or anything. I promise. My dad has a camera, and he lets me hold it sometimes, I guess. And I took a picture of my dog. It wasn't very good, 'cause I got my finger in the way and... Add in some feet shuffling and or body swaying, and you've got a typical kid talking to a stranger. In short, they're usually apologetic. People generally teach children that when they talk to adults, they're usually bothering them for one reason or another, and they should at least be polite. This kid was in no way fitting the mold. His command of language was incredible, and he showed no signs of fear. He spoke as if my help was a foregone conclusion. When he grinned, it was as if he was trying to say, I know something, and you're not gonna like it. But the only way you're gonna find out what it is will be to do what I say. Well, was the best I could offer. Now here's where it starts to get strange. The quiet companion looked at the spokesman with a mixture of confusion and guilt on his face. He seemed in some ways shocked, not with his friend's brusque manner, but that I didn't just immediately open the door. He eyed me nervously. The spokesman seemed a bit perturbed too. I still was registering something odd with both. Come on, mister, the spokesman said again, as smooth as silk. A car salesman could learn something from this kid. Now, we just want to go to our house, and we're just two little boys. That really scared me. Something in the tone and diction again sent off alarm bells. My mind was frantically trying to process what it was perceiving about the two figures that was wrong. Was all I could manage. I felt myself digging my fingernails into the steering wheel. What movie were you going to see? I asked finally. Mortal Kombat, of course, the spokesman said. The silent one nodded in affirmation, standing a few paces behind. Oh, I said. I stole a quick glance at the marquee and at the clock in my car. Mortal Kombat had been playing for an hour, the last showing of the evening. The silent one looked increasingly nervous. I think he saw my glances and suspected that I might be detecting something was not above board. Come on, mister. Let us in. We can't get into your car until you do, you know, the spokesman said, soothingly. Just let us in, and we'll be gone before you know it. We'll go to our mother's house. We locked eyes. To my horror, I realized my hand had strayed towards the door lock, which was engaged, and was in the process of opening it. I pulled it away, probably a bit too violently, but it did force me to look away from the children. I turned back. I offered weakly, and then my mind snapped into sharp focus. For the first time, I noticed their eyes. They were coal black. No pupil, no iris, just two staring orbs reflecting the red and white light of the marquee. At that point, I know my expression betrayed me. The silent one had a look of horror on his face in a combination that seemed to indicate A, the impossible had just happened, and B, we've been found out. The spokesman, on the other hand, wore a mask of anger. His eyes glittered brightly in the half-light. Come on, mister, he said. We won't hurt you. You have to let us in. We don't have a gun. The last statement scared the living hell out of me, because at that point, by his tone, he was plainly saying, we don't need a gun. He noticed my hand shooting down toward the gear shift. The spokesman's final words contained an anger that was complete and whole, and yet contained in some respects a tone of panic. We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in. I ripped the car into reverse. Thank goodness no one was coming up behind me, and tore out of the parking lot. I noticed the boys in my peripheral vision, and I stole a quick glance back. They were gone. The sidewalk by the theater was deserted. I drove home in a heightened state of panic. Had anyone attempted to stop me, I would have run on through and faced the consequences later. I bolted into my house, scanning all around, including the sky. What did I see? Maybe nothing more than some kids looking for a ride, and some really funky contacts. Yeah, right. All credit for this story goes to Brian Bethel. And your next story is The Fourth Child. My mother, my siblings, and I moved into this awesome new house a few months ago. It's a really cool plantation-style home out in what was once a rural area outside of New Orleans. By now, the area is a little more built up, so it's really more like a spacious suburb. Anyway, it had been about 9 months since our father died. My mum really wanted us to get away from our old house. It was full of too many memories. She wanted us to have a cool, spacious house to play in and give us a fresh start. Apparently, we got this place at a decent deal because the former owner was this old woman who passed away and her family wanted to get the extra house off their hands. She died peacefully in her sleep, but it still made us a little uncomfortable, so no one moved into her bedroom. We just let it be a guest room if anyone had any visitors. We have a wonderful neighbor named Miss Leah, who lives next door to us, about a half-mile away. She's a small but powerfully built woman who welcomed us to the area with open arms. The former owner of the house was an old friend of hers who she visited all the time, and my mother soon took on the role of her new friend. They immediately became best friends, always giggling in our kitchen on the weekends. Miss Leah loves telling tales of voodoo and even practices it herself. Many in New Orleans do. She mostly practices the light voodoo, like charms for good luck and protection. She told me that you can talk to spirits if you write them letters and put them in a place where they know to find them. I started to see her every now and then, late at night when I can't sleep, sticking envelopes into our mailbox. I can see it from my window. When I'd go out in the morning, though, no envelopes would be there. One night, I saw her doing the usual mailbox routine, and as soon as we walked far enough away, I ran out to see what she was putting in our mailbox. I saw a little, silvery, unaddressed letter to Maggie, which turns out to be the name of the old lady who lived in our house before us. I always thought Miss Leah was joking about talking to the dead, but it's clear she practices it herself. Just to test things out, I stood at the mailbox, watching it for a few hours. Eventually, the sun began to break over the horizon, so I figured I'd had waited ample time. I opened the mailbox. The letter was gone. At first, I was in complete disbelief, but then I was overcome with excitement. If Miss Leah could talk to Maggie, maybe I could talk to my dad. I keep a little shoebox under my bed. It's full of little trinkets and pictures that remind me of my dad. I go through it every now and then when I miss him most, as sort of therapy. A few nights trying to rationalize what had happened with the note to Maggie. I decided the best way to test this out was to try it myself. I wrote a letter to my dad, which felt silly at first, because I don't know what dead people like to talk about. I wrote, "Dear Daddy, miss you. How are things on the other side? Mum bought this cool house for us, and we have a fun neighbor lady named Miss Leah. We're all doing okay over here, but I especially miss waking up every morning to the sounds of your loud singing in the shower. I hated it back then, but now I realize how funny and charming it was. Sincerely, Julia." I placed the note into my special shoebox and slipped it back under the bed. When I woke up in the morning, it wasn't there. I wasn't sure how to handle it. Did he really get the message? Does he write back? What do I do now? Well, I still needed to get to school that day, so the excitement of my supernatural letter writing subsided, and I headed over to the bathroom to get ready. My older brother was singing his lungs out in the shower, something unusual for him, but I figure he was trying to become more like our dad. I knocked on the door. "Hurry up in there! I need to pee!" The singing continued. "Jay, how much longer are you going to take?" The singing continued. Then someone tapped on my shoulder. I turned around. It was Jay. He said, "Calm down, Julia. I'm not in the bathroom. Is the door locked? Let me see if I can jimmy it open for you." He opened the door with ease. The bathroom was empty. No singing. The shower wasn't running, but the tub was wet. I walked in and started brushing my teeth, amused by what had just happened. I noticed the mirror was a little bit foggy, as though from shower steam. There was a message written in the mirror. It said, "How bad do you miss me?" I walked the fine line between being totally freaked out and super elated that my dad was communicating with me. I wrote another letter that night. "I miss you more than you can possibly imagine, Daddy. Don't ever doubt that. But tell me, how are things on the other side?" The morning I woke up, the letter in the shoebox was gone, but I noticed a new letter near my door. It looked like someone slipped it under there. I opened it up. It said, "What do you want most from me?" I found it weird that my dad wasn't carrying the conversation well, but I decided I'd write a quick response and go to school. I wrote, "Well, I guess what I want most is for you to come back and play with me like old times, but I know that's silly." When I got back from school, I went straight to my room to check on the letter. I opened my door, and the dollhouse, which is stored in my attic, was smack in the middle of the floor. My mum had been at work all day, my brother was still at swim practice, and my sister went to the mall with her friend after dropping me off at home. I don't know who could have moved it, except maybe my dad. I saw a note next to the dollhouse. It said, "Play with me." My body froze. Something was unsettling about this setup. I didn't feel like I was in danger or anything, but I just wasn't comfortable. I walked to Miss Leia's house, and she was sitting in her rocking chair on the front porch with her cat, Rufus, in her lap. I told her I knew about the letters she wrote to Maggie. "Ah, yes, sweetheart," she said. "Even though she's passed, I haven't stopped talking to Miss Maggie one bit. She was my best friend, and I want her to know how much I love her and how much Rufus misses the little tuna trees she'd given him. I write her almost every day, just updating her on my life so that when I pass too, it'll be like she didn't miss a beat." She asked me if I was thinking about writing to the dead too. For some reason, I didn't feel comfortable telling Miss Leia that I had been writing to my dad already. I told her I was considering writing a letter to my dad and that I would try it out that night. She laughed. "Okay, honey. You'll have to let me know how it goes tomorrow." I played with Rufus for a little while as Miss Leia talked on the phone with her nephew. The sun started going down and I figured it was about time for dinner, so I said goodbye to Miss Leia and Rufus and walked back over to my house. My mum and everyone else were already back. "My God, where have you been?" my mum yelled. I told her I was hanging out with Miss Leia, which eased her nerves a little bit since she knew I'd been home for a while, which scared her. My sister was grounded for abandoning me for the afternoon, but she said it was smart of me to go to Miss Leia's. She then said, "You know that dollhouse was expensive, right?" Which seemed like an odd question, but I answered, "Yes, I suppose. Why?" And she explained, "Well, I guess I just wished you'd taken better care of it, is all. I saw it in your room when I was looking for you, and I could see you picked off all its paint, and there were some dings and dents, and I just thought it was such a shame. Also, next time you're getting something from the attic, wait until I get home and I can help you, honey." Bewildered by my mother's comment, I ate dinner in silence. Afterwards, I helped with the dishes and made my way back to my room with apprehension. It seemed like the dollhouse was in great condition last I saw, so I knew something must have happened after I left. I prayed my mum was just seeing things, that the dollhouse was indeed exactly how I left it. I opened my door. My mum was wrong. The dollhouse wasn't a little dinged up. It had been ripped to bits. Its tattered remains were strewn about the floor. Even my little dolls were mangled with their arms snapped backwards and their heads missing. I couldn't fathom what had just happened. Then I saw the letter. "Why won't you play with me?" My hair stood on end. I could feel the rage emanating throughout the room. I tried to rationalize. I tried to tell myself that the context made me sense rage, but there was nothing to worry about. But how can you rationalize things when you're going around writing letters to dead people who break your furniture? I felt terrible that I had upset my father this way. He bought me that dollhouse himself, so it must have hurt to destroy it. I immediately wrote a new letter to my dad saying, "Daddy, I'm so sorry for not playing with you. I love you, but I think we need to let go. You belong on the other side and I belong here. I just want to say one more thing to you. Something I never got the chance to say before. Goodbye, Daddy. Julia." I slept alongside my brother that night. He was nice about it. Didn't even ask what I was afraid of. He could tell I was disturbed and he didn't want to push me. Before we went to bed, he did say one thing. "You know, there's no such thing as monsters, right?" "Yes," I whispered. At that point, I wasn't sure if I was lying or not. It was still comforting to say it. I didn't think I was dealing with a monster, or at least I wasn't sure about it. I didn't even really know what a monster was supposed to be. A dragon? A boogeyman in your closet? An angry father? The next day was Saturday, and I still wasn't comfortable being in my room for long. I got dressed and walked to Miss Leah's. I wanted to leave the house without checking the shoebox. It felt like I was leaving an angry parent and wanted to give them time to cool off before we talk again. Miss Leah was sitting with Rufus as usual, and they both watched the blue jays hop around in their yard. Rufus slightly more attentive than Miss Leah.
"Well, hey there, sweetheart,"
Miss Leah called out.
"How did it go last night?"
I knew she was talking about the letter, and I knew she'd know exactly how to fix things. But before I could begin speaking, she interrupted.
"Let me guess. It didn't work?"
"Why would you say that?" I asked.
"Because I know better than anyone else that spirits can't move physical objects. I have to use my special charm paper to write to Maggie, and I doubt you got any charm paper."
I felt ashamed after that. I'm not sure why. I guess I felt like I'd been deceiving Miss Leah. I didn't tell her the whole story. I just told her I thought it worked because the letter was gone.
"Well, Julia, my best guess is you've got a prankster in your house. Probably your brother. He's too silly for his age."
She went on about all the things she's told Maggie. She said it didn't happen often, as it was hard for Maggie's frail little spirit to do much of anything except read. But Maggie would sometimes write back. Maggie said she hadn't crossed over yet, but when she did cross over, she wouldn't be able to get letters anymore. Maggie said that she loved Miss Leah and her letters, but one day she'd need to move on. She said eventually that Miss Leah won't have the strength to write these letters, and they would become fewer and fewer. Once Maggie knew it was too hard for Miss Leah to write anymore, she'd cross over and wait patiently with Petunia, another one of Miss Leah's cats who had passed away. Maggie said Miss Leah would know when she crossed over because her letters would stay in the mailbox, and no one would take them. I wandered home later that afternoon wondering if my dad was ever going to cross over. I wasn't sure how to feel. I know what I saw and what I did. I wrote letters to my dad. I left them where he'd check our box. They were gone later. I heard him in the shower. I saw his message in the mirror. I saw the dollhouse and his notes. I know no one in the house could have moved the dollhouse, and I was certain it was Daddy. I arrived in my room, fragments of the dollhouse still scattered about the floor. I remember the last letter I wrote, the one that asked my dad to move on. I was afraid he'd be angry with me. I was afraid he'd accuse me of not loving him enough, or lying to him. I didn't want to check the box, but I needed to see if he got the message. I opened it. The letter was gone. But in its place was a new letter. It said, Julia, on the cover. So I knew it was for me. I figured he wrote back. I opened it, and I was horrified at what I saw. Daddy isn't here. I bolted down the stairs and prepared to run back to Miss Leia's and explain everything. But I didn't have to. There she was, giggling with my mum in the kitchen. I started walking toward them, but there was something on the other side of the division between the kitchen and living room, where I could still see it, but Mum and Miss Leia couldn't. We put a framed picture of Dad there in order to remember him. There was a note on the picture. It said, "Say a word, and they're dead." I wasn't sure what to do. I knew I needed to keep quiet, but I also knew that something very, very sinister was going on, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. My sister and brother were going to a big house party, and my mum wanted to go hang out with her girlfriends that night, so Miss Leia actually came over to take me to her house for the night. My mum tried to apologize for the late notice, but I was so excited to get out of the house and away from whatever it was that she didn't even get to finish her apology. That night, Miss Leia let me stay up late with her and Rufus. At around 12 a.m., she started writing a letter on her special charm paper. It was very thin and glowed a silvery hue. I asked her how to make it, and she said that it comes from the soul. We walked to my house together and put the letter in the mailbox. The next day, my mum picked me up and we stopped by the mailbox because someone had pulled the lever up. There was a note for Miss Leia there, and I knew exactly who it was from. The paper had that same thinness and silvery glow. Mum wrote it off as someone dropping it off in the wrong box and asked if I would run back and give it to Miss Leia's. I sprinted down the street to Miss Leia's. She opened the letter and began reading while I sat and waited with Rufus. When she was done, Miss Leia's face turned pale. I never thought I'd see such a white porcelain complexion on a live human being. All the color was gone from her face and she trembled. She was clearly disturbed, very disturbed. She told me not to go home, that she'd call my mum and everyone would come over for lunch. She immediately put down the letter and picked up her phone. Once her back was turned, I took the letter to read it. Dearest Leia, so sorry I've taken such a long time to write back to you. It seems that I lack the spiritual power necessary to write. Heck, I could hardly even write when I was alive and had hands. The lady who moved into my old house with her family is lovely as ever, and I want you to know that I've been watching y'all's friendship and I'm so happy for you. I miss giggling in the kitchen with you, but watching you and her talk is almost as good. I'll bet you met all her children as well. Most of them are sweet as can be. Jay has a heart of gold and seems to really take care for the family. Catherine has a great sense of humor, always makes me and the rest of the family laugh. Julia is a curious little one. She reminds me a bit of you. Then there's the fourth child. It's a vicious little thing. You know the one I'm talking about. The one with the black eyes and the long dark claws that lives in my old room. It's always causing a ruckus. I'm glad I'm dead. That little scoundrel really gives me the creeps. It watches poor Julia as she sleeps and leaves awful little notes around the house. I noticed the other day that it starts taking knives out of the drawers at night and brings them under the bed with it. That mother should really do something about keeping it under control. Perhaps you could help with that. Can't wait for your next correspondence. Fondly, Maggie. I couldn't breathe. I just sat frozen as Miss Leia screamed into the phone.
Oh God, please tell me y'all are okay. Pick up the phone, please. Pick up the phone.
She decided to call 911. When the police got to my house, Miss Leia and I waited outside. They found my mum, my brother, my sister. They found them all over the house, lacerated into shreds of flesh. They couldn't determine how it happened. Figured it was a wild animal or something. But Miss Leia and I know how it happened. While we were waiting outside the house, we both looked up into my bedroom window. Standing there, in the room where I slept that night, was a black-eyed child with an evil grin that stretched ear to ear. It raised one long, sharp finger, probably 12 inches long, to its mouth, as if to say, "Shh." All credit to this story goes to J-Rog. Whoa, both of these are just great! The first story really feels like parts of it echoes the tropes of black-eyed kids, so they come up to you, make a request, and that request is actually a magical suggestion, and is often to take them home, wherever the heck home is. And it's only those that seem to see through the illusion that their facade comes crumbling down. I found this really interesting, and I can see how these stories can pull people in. And the second story, my goodness! Talk about nail-biting in some areas. It's one of the few stories I've read where the black-eyed kids don't need an illusion, and just mess shit up. Seriously, this seems like what would happen if these Becks actually entered a house. Very creepy. Okay, you brilliant people. If you enjoyed the episode, show me some love. Whether that's letting your friend or family know about this channel, commenting on the SoundCloud channel, a lot of lovely people do that, or even subscribing on the platform you're on. These sort of things really help the channel and get even more exposure for the author's stories that I host on here. And let me just say, holy moly, you people are great. I remember asking for iTunes reviews a little while ago, and the channel is at 35 reviews. You people blow me away every day. So thank you so much. And now, listeners, it is that time. This is the place where stories live, and you telltellers come to listen. Enjoy your day or night, and join me every weekday for our creepy tradition. And as always, till next time.